Good afternoon, everyone. The June 10th Ascension Parish Zoning Commission is now in session. Take note that all commissioners are present with the exception of Mr. Sonja and Mr. Ori. Staff?
Patrice Johnson, Zoning Secretary.
Can I get a motion for acceptance for the previous minutes to meeting?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
It's been motioned. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor? First order of business. Public hearing to amend the Ascension Parish Development Code for recommendation. Item A, public hearing to consider zoning review ID 2504.15, Lot 1.
Who's presenting?
Sorry, I don't think they showed up. I contacted them earlier in the month to see if they still want to be on the agenda. They never contacted me either way, so we went forward with it. So that's where we are at this point, I guess.
So why are they on the agenda?
They paid. They asked to be put on the next month's agenda, so we put them on next month's agenda.
Okay.
Doesn't warrant any action from this commission.
Oh, yeah, well, they want,
It's on the deal.
they want
Up to
a
you.
recommendation for us.
Any discussion, staff?
Public hearing, so.
Yeah, the recommendation is to deny the RM medium intensity residential as requested due to inconsistency with existing uses and zoning and because of traffic concerns.
Any comments from commissioners?
I'd like to have the public hearing first and then comment.
This time, we'd like to open the floor for public hearing. Any comments? Any cards?
Yes, we have two. Paul Malonson.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name's Paul Manasseh. I live at 42345 Weber City Road, across Weber City Road from the property. Was here to oppose the rezoning of that property. Since it's not going to be spoke about tonight, I still wanted to put a few things on the table that, at least before the commission, whenever they come back for consideration, I certainly would like to see if there would be a drainage impact study performed. That's where they're looking at. I know that they're looking at some retention ponds on the property in the front, and there's a large drainage ditch that runs through there that I think they were looking to empty into those retention ponds, passes under 431 and cuts through our property. I have some pictures of that ditch with recent rains, full capacity. I have 6-foot culverts through my property that go to the back that continue on the Francois. That property drains to our direction rather than going to New River, which New River is on the backside of it. So I certainly would like to have that drainage impact study considered and to see if it is going to move forward, to have that drainage go in a northerly direction towards New River potentially, rather than sending that additional rainwater through that potential. And I think traffic studies traffic was an issue. We're in a large curve there. I know got with the sheriff's department. They run radar frequently in the little white house that's cut out of the property up front, and there's frequently those guys are there once a week or so, and I'm going to get the numbers, how many tickets they write for our people, how fast people are on that curve. One of the deputies stopped me one day and said, "I clocked somebody doing 72 coming into the curve," and I can get that from the sheriff's office. So it's a tough curve. So that's the only thing I wanted to bring up. If in the future they do bring it up, and I'll be here to address those issues with some more information at that time. But thank you.
Well, I think we are considering it tonight.
We're
not postponing consideration of it just
Okay.
because they're not here. You know, they asked that it be put on the agenda. It's on the agenda, so
Okay, I'm just not aware. I just wanted to, if we had the opportunity to speak against it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patricia Malonzo. I live directly across 429 from the property they're wanting to turn into a subdivision. One of my concerns is drainage. The last couple of years, the ditch that runs in the middle of my property has been at capacity on several occasions, which allows me not to use the washing machine or to have to limit the amount of time that you flush toilets because you're scared of them backing up. And I have 2 drainage boxes in the front of my yard, which instead of letting the water drain out of my yard, the excess water is bubbling up out of them and filling my front yard with water. The other thing I was wondering is, this is concerning drainage also, is any fill dirt going to be brought into this property? Because already the roads, concrete, the houses, the driveway, all of that is adding to the property not being able to absorb the water, and it'll come off of it quicker into my yard. And on the map, they showed that they're going to relocate the drainage ditch that runs in property across the road from my house. And I was just wondering where that was going to be relocated to. And the entrance to the subdivision, as it was brought up, is in this curve, and it's really sometimes very hard to get out of my driveway as it is. But they will be directly in the curve, which will not allow people to see the vehicles coming in and out of the subdivision, so that might create a hazard there. But my main concern is the drainage, because much more water is going to add to my problems. I have a little picture here. We're going to try and locate some more of showing. Yeah, my son took these, so I'm not quite sure where I'd in the yard, but, oh yeah, this is the ditch that runs through the middle of my property, the top one. And you can see where is pretty much to the top of the ditch. And I don't have a picture of the 2 drainage boxes, but the water comes up on the state highway right away that we close the ditch in with culverts and stuff. And that's my thing I'm concerned about is the drainage and the density of the lots. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any further comments? Staff have a question. How plausible would it be for it to be part of the process when we have these requests for rezoning, environmental impact studies, studies to see the challenges on the current utility base? I don't recall any of these requests where there was a reduction on the impacts to the environment. So obviously there has to be a concern, someone watching that.
Well, for a rezone, typically an applicant isn't going to go through those costs or incur those expenses. They're trying to see if there's the political wherewithal to have the zoning changed to go to that next step. The drawings that are included in this packet are as equivalent to a pencil drawing on a napkin. It's just an idea of what they would propose. And I wanted to explain our recommendation to deny. When we passed the major subdivision guidelines, part of that states that while we think smaller lots in rural and conservation zoning are okay, we don't think they're okay on the boundary or perimeter of the project. And they simply missed that when they were drawing their little concept sketch. And so when we called them to tell them, hey, you've got to either put a 200-foot buffer around the perimeter of your project, or you need to match the existing lot size of that underlining zoning, which in rural is half-acre lots. By us doing some basic math, they were only gaining 2 lots over what the current zoning allows. We told them, we're not going to recommend rezoning your property for a gain of 2 lots. So they asked if there was anything else they could do. We said, well, you could rezone it to a PUD and get a lot more lots, but we're going to recommend denial on that as well. So they chose to postpone it for 30 days. They never recommunicated with us. At this point, we put them back on the agenda because they paid, they advertised, and we advertised a public hearing. But our recommendation still stands to deny this request.
They got notice that they were on the agenda for tonight,
Multiple times, yes, sir.
and they chose not to be here?
That's our understanding.
Jackie, and we'll just move on.
Seems to
further
me that
com-
if you're looking to have property rezoned, that you would be here to make your case
You would think.
for our recommendation. Leads me to believe they're not that serious about having this proposal.
No further comments? At this time, close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
Move for
I
denial.
Who's that? Mr. Burgess moved. And I'll second.
It's been motion and second for denial. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 So noted, the motion to deny is unanimous. Item 5B, public hearing to consider 15-03.
Good evening, Commissioner. Councilman Oliver Jones, representing District 1 and rezoning. I just wanted to give you a brief overview, background of this overlay. And just many years ago, about 8 years ago, we created a mega site on the west side of the river, was Point Homer. And it was supposed to be a heavy industrial, but we could not find anyone to actually get anyone to buy that land. So Mike normally come up to the council and always give reports, and it always had reports good about the East Bank, but the West Bank, he could never find land. The zoning wasn't good enough, and so we started working together on this, and we started talking about overlay. I talked to our planning and zoning, and he said that was a pretty good idea, how we gonna do it. So we got with planning and zoning, Ricky, Parish president, and Mike, and we started looking at property, and then we got involved with the landowners. We met with the major landowners and community, and we came up with this overlay plan. And if this overlay plan goes through, it will help the economic development on the West Bank and 17,000 acres. So that's where we are, and Mike will carry forward what is the plan. So I appreciate your consideration on this overlay.
Staff comments?
Good evening, gentlemen. Mike Eads, President and CEO of Ascension Economic Development Corporation. It pleases us to come before you to follow up on a matter that came before you about a month ago. I'd like to begin by introducing our project team that's here with us. First and foremost is my chairman, Mr. Bill Dawson, over here. This is Lisa Laws, who's our project manager at AEDC. This gentleman here is Mr. Jim Kavanaugh with Baton Rouge Area Chamber, who's the manager of site development. This young man right here is Taylor Gravois, who's our consulting engineer with CSRS Incorporated. We have another partner, which isn't here, not represented, but it's a critical partner to us, is Louisiana Department of Economic Development. They are heavily invested with us on this project to the tune of paying 75% of the cost of the due diligence that we're going to need to do to move this project forward, to see if we can do what we're trying to do, which is to develop a well-planned industrial business complex on the west bank of the river. The mission of Ascension Economic Development Corporation is very simple, and that is to maximize economic opportunity in Ascension Parish, very simply stated. I think we all agree that well, I'll say this, our mission is to maximize economic development in all of Ascension Parish. And I think all of us would probably agree that there are parts of our parish that maybe haven't enjoyed the level of economic activity that other parts have had. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity here for us to make a significant change in that. We're dealing with a piece of land, and if I could have the overhead turned on, please. This is 17,000 acres. It starts close to where the Evan Hall Sugar Mill used to be. There are 10 miles approximately of river frontage running all the way up to the Iberville Parish line, down the parish boundary, across Highway 1 and the railroad, and then back over here. In addition to the 10 miles of river frontage, you have 4.5 miles of frontage on Highway 1, as well as, of course, with the railroad running parallel to Highway 1, another 4.5 miles of rail. Like I said, the entire project area is about 17,000 acres in all. What's being requested here is the creation of an overlay district. So I want to make that clear. We are not asking for rezoning of this property. We're asking for an overlay that would allow the rezoning of property to certain industrial uses along with the MU. Specifically, there's five categories that are suggested to be allowed: light industrial, medium industrial, heavy industrial, mixed use, and the MHRV, your code that, or district you just adopted to allow for in certain circumstances for the recreational vehicle lots and that type of thing. There are some other caveats in the mixed use, and the recommendation is that the density, the residential density, remain at 1 acre, just like it is in a minimum of 1 acre, just like it is currently in conservation, and also that no major subdivisions be allowed in that mixed use area. And also on that MHRV, that would have to be located in the mixed use. Again, I want to stress again, no one is suggesting that anybody's property be rezoned through this process. It is to allow a property owner to come through the process to ask for his or her property to be rezoned to one of these uses. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have at this stage, or I'll sit down and listen to the other comments and respond as appropriate.
Mike, within the property you outlined in red on that map, on the southeastern end, is something that we approved to be heavy industrial some time ago.
Correct.
Right, that's included in this overlay now?
It is included in the project area, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, on one of the maps, it looks like there's some type of facility, I don't know if it's a barge cleaning service or what, there along that 10-mile stretch. Do you know what that is?
That is a barge, yes, it's a barge servicing operation.
What's the zone right there currently for?
All of the batch over there is zoned medium intensity, medium industrial, intensity industrial.
Well, if the overlay were granted, what do you see as the challenges to attract industrial development to this tract?
That's a very good question, Mr. Burgess, and I'll tell you, we're working on that even as we speak. We're the first two things I'll tell you, we've already signed the contract. Two pieces of due diligence are railroad and dock. Can we get that infrastructure developed so as to be able to attract, business and industry in there. And I think that's, if the answer to either one of those is no, then we probably gonna tuck our tails between our legs and go home. Beyond that, you have the obvious challenges. There's no industrial power in that area. We do have natural gas and brine, but there's no product, there's no hydrogen, there's no industrial water service. So there's a lot of work to do. And our vision for this, by the way, I should have said this before originally. Somebody made the comment that we're trying to recreate Geismar. Oh, yeah. Well, I want to clarify that. We're not trying to recreate Geismar. Geismar was not planned. And if those of you who are familiar with Geismar, that's not news, as you drive through there and see how it was developed rather haphazardly. Mm-hmm. A lot of duplication of infrastructure over there. We're trying to do a better job, frankly, at planning this. And I think one of the advantages of that in doing so, if we can develop shared services, whether that's docks and rail yards or whatever it may be, it increases the amount of available land for new business, because everybody then has to go in and duplicate services, and it saves people money, frankly. It's a marketing issue for us. So there's a tremendous amount of work to do. We have a plan, we have a schedule out for all the due diligence beyond the dock and rail we talked about. We're talking about geotech, wetlands, phase 1 environmental. The list is extremely long. I'll tell you that the initial cost on our phase 1 due diligence is about, say, what, $1.6 million, something like that. And that's just to get to the point of being able to say, yeah, this is a go, and we're going to master plan, go from there. And obviously, roads are an issue. One of the big issues there, getting adequate transportation.
And time frame for due diligence?
With the major property owners, we have an agreement that gives us access to their property. That agreement is a 2-year agreement from around the 1st of this past April. We have certain milestones we have to meet in 1 year, and if we meet those, and I have that list with me if you want to get it out, but if we meet those, then that agreement automatically extends for another year. So we can do the more intense. So it's a couple of years from turning a spade of dirt. Also, one of the things that's in that overlay language is at the end of 2 years after presuming approval of this by council, if nothing has happened, if we don't have a client, then there's a clause in the language that where our organization would make a recommendation to the parish council to either continue to have the overlay or to do away with it.
Mike, Mr. Sanji couldn't be here tonight, but he asked me to convey his concern about the proximity of the proposed industrial area development to Lowry, to the school, and actually to the town of Donaldsonville. I am also concerned about the impacts to my hometown. I would hope that in the long term, it would be very, very positive. And I think I recommended to you recently that you make a presentation to the council in Donaldsonville and keep them up to speed as to what you're doing, and I hope you plan to do that if you haven't done it already. But Mr. Sanji is especially concerned, being the past school superintendent, about the proximity of this to the school and what the potential impacts are, and what are the plans, if any, for buffering that situation, or for what. I think you're going to have to address that, and we're going to need to talk about that too.
I guess my only comment about that is that took place, you all approved that in February. And
yeah,
that's
why I asked you about that, that area to the southeast.
It doesn't need to circle back through you in that direction versus us. I guess we'll discuss it and figure out what,
Yeah, and I don't know, frankly, we were really remiss in our responsibility if we made that heavy industrial back whenever we did. Was it Last year? This past February? I don't even remember it, but the issue of the proximity to the school never even came up. And I wonder why it didn't, but I don't know whose responsibility that was. I think we were remiss in our responsibility to not consider that when it came before us, so.
Frankly, I was a little bit surprised when I saw the end result of that rezoning, that it wasn't buffered.
Yeah.
Because it is a practice of the parish to do that, but, you know, as I understand it, it's not in the code. It's not referenced anywhere in the code that it's required, but it's been a routine practice. And if you look at the zoning map all through the industrial area, you see it, but
You know,
I don't.
the school board right now is battling with a situation they've got with, it's a primary school or a primary school, I guess, that has to be relocated. It's within 2 miles of CF Industries. It has to be relocated. And they're dealing with that issue now, and are we creating another issue for them to deal with? I'd like to, I know Chad's in the audience, and I think Chad will want to speak. I think he signed up to speak when we open the public hearing, and I'd like to hear what his concerns are, and maybe we can discuss what the possibilities are for us to mitigate, you know, whatever we've done that we shouldn't have done perhaps, but to mitigate that situation with the school.
Well, yeah, like I said, we're happy to work with the commission and staff on reaching a mutual agreeable conclusion. I mean, if you look at what's being proposed, the residential area in particular in this project area is heavily buffered by design.
Any comments from staff? This time, we'd like to open the floor for public hearing.
Good evening, Jeffrey Zarang. I live in Modas 8377 Highway 405. My original concern with all of this is just to have my rights as a landowner preserved, no matter what they do in this project. And I've talked to them, and they've been gracious enough to explain a few things to me. You know, as long as my rights to do with my property as I see fit continue as they are today, then I don't have a problem with it. But, you know, you brought up a point that has been an issue with me also, is that the buffer zones, you know, they buffer somewhat. And, you know, I told them, I say, industry tends to buffer themselves, if you will. They're going to want to buffer to a certain extent, and they do, and they enjoy that fact. I just want to see possibly to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And like I said, you know, I don't have any problem with the whole project going on as long as my rights are preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, hey, Chad Lynch, Director of Planning and Construction for the school board. I just appreciate all the comments y'all made so far, you know, addressing the buffer situation. As I understand it, there's a lot next to the school that has already been zoned heavy industrial recently. So obviously with that property, we just would want to have some continuing discussion with you to try to figure out, you know, if a buffer isn't currently required in the ordinance, can we add one? And, you know, if one was added, would that property then be grandfathered to the old rules that didn't have one, or would it pick up the buffer that was added? Another thought I had, just because, you know, our goal is not to shut down the great project that they're doing or anything like that. It would just be to try to find that fine line between the kids being safe at the sites that they're at and industry thriving in our community. But just want to make sure the kids are safe. You know, when we study a new school site, we do environmental assessments, and we look at those distances to keep us, you know, how far do we have to be away from certain things, and that's how we select our sites. And in this case, we're already there. And so we would just hope that as y'all develop around us with the plans that y'all are coming up with, that we consider the safety of the kids. And, you know, if there's not a buffer required in the heavy industrial, could we add one? And then the other thing I thought of is, listening to Mr. Eads, you know, as they try to attract businesses, there were a lot of different proposed uses in the documents that I read for this. You know, what if the ones that are closest to the school, if we could try to bring in the less risky of those uses to the lots that are closest to the school, as opposed to the higher risks that are in those tracks that are close to the school. There might be a way to manage this to make sure that we are a great distance from anything that's hazardous. And, we have plans for shelter in place if something goes on, but you really just hope that, as y'all move forward with the plan, that we can come up with something that makes sure the kids are safe. And I know that'll be y'all's goal as well. The other thing, and maybe you can, I can get some follow-up discussion with Mr. Compton, just wondering do we already know of any proposed uses that are headed this way for that track that's closest to us? I'll probably have some discussions offline with them about it. But anything y'all can do as you continue to look at this overlay zone, even the overlay zone itself, are there things that may need to be put in it that would protect the school site? I wish there was an overlay zone for schools that, had a way of catching that, a proposed use when somebody tries to permit something that might be risky to the school site, that maybe there's a certain distance from the school that would have to be. And if you're outside of it, then okay. But that would be our concern, is just that y'all, as you move forward, we make sure that that the kids are safe at that site. And so if y'all have any questions for me, Dr. Pujol asked me to come and ask whatever questions I felt were necessary. The buffer and the distance is the most important one that stands out at me. And then she said that if y'all had any questions for us, I could take them back to the board. And we also do have a board member present. Ms. Delaney is here. She signed a card.
What's the, what distance of a buffer would you consider?
Well, I'll give you an example of what I've learned from reading environmental assessments. When we study a site, a distance, I'll see a 0.4 or 0.5 miles, something like that, different. But it depends on what the proposed risk is. When they study our sites that we look at to purchase, they'll look at any potential environmental hazard. It might be a doctor's office that generates medical waste, or a chemical plant. There are a lot of different, a paint company with paint cans outside. And the studies that we get back, there's different distances for each different risk. And so that's why I say, as that site gets some proposed development, what is that use? What type of risk might be involved with it? There's a distance that EPA knows. There's a standard distance to stay away. And that's what I wonder. Does the ordinance take into account standard EPA rules and regulations? Or maybe those would guide anyway. If somebody tried to do something too close to a school, maybe there is a rule that prevents them from doing so. But I'm not sure if there is, so I'm asking y'all to help us, figure that out, make sure we're safe. Any other questions?
For the presenters, considering safety is the #1 concept in the master plan, I guess I would ask, would you be amenable to work with them, considering what they're stating, safety for the children, the variety of different type of industries that could show up there, to consider adequate buffers, recommendation, be it EPA, anyone in dealing with the environment, would you be amenable to working with them to ensure that these things?
And we would have went, had I known a little more about this before, I probably would have went to Mr. Eads and Ricky. So I apologize for that, us getting kind of short notice on it. I didn't realize it was going on, so I'm here now. I wish I'd had an opportunity to probably talk to them beforehand. And we'll continue discussions with
We
them.
appreciate you being here, Chad, and representing the school, and the school board representative being here also. And Councilman Joseph. I wanted to ask Mike a question about that area. And Mike, you presented this maybe last time you met with us, and I've forgotten. What are the most likely areas along the river that would be a deep water site? Is that area we're talking about a particular deep water site?
If I had the answer to that question, we wouldn't be getting ready to spend about $150,000 to find out.
Yeah, I thought you might have had. It seems to me you had maybe the most likely sites that would be.
We've had various opinions,
docking.
frankly, and they varied by location. So, yeah, we've hired Dewberry Incorporated, which is a very large international planning firm, and they are looking at that even as we speak.
Yeah. Well, my point about that was if that particular site that's close to the school is not amenable to a docking facility, then chances are it wouldn't be. It's not that large a site either. It wouldn't be a really heavy industrial site. Ricky, does the overlay allow us to? What kind of flexibility do we have with respect to what happens within the overlay? Can we dictate what sort of industry can be, what sort of development can be in that quadrant? Is that something that that Mike has to work on and everyone has to, put warehousing there as opposed to, for instance, some active chemical plant?
I'm sure you could, but this parcel is already rezoned heavy industry.
Got it. But it's within the overlay now, or proposed overlay.
They could opt out.
Okay.
I mean, easily, which, Lance and I are sitting over here. The recommendation when that parcel came before this body and the council was to accept the rezone but place light industry 660 feet around the southeast of the property lines and keep the existing light industry along the river. The applicant wasn't interested, so this body and the council approved it as heavy industry. It is what it is at this point.
Okay.
Any further comments?
I'd just like to say my name is Robin Pendelaney. I am the school board rep for District 1 from Donaldsonville. And I think the action by the council was taken in February of this year. I think a lot of things were not taken into consideration because you may not have been aware of it. But in regards to Donaldsonville Primary School, which is next to CF, CF has been a great partner in our community. We appreciate them. They came there in 1964. The school, Donaldsonville Primary School, with 560 students now have, it's less than 0.8 of a mile from CF because of the expansion. We love CF. They've been great partners, but my concern is about the children and their safety first in regards to that. In regards to the other expansion, right now, Laurie Elementary School is there in that area. Laurie Middle School, you have 900 plus students there. There's a lot of thought about putting them for shelter in place, but you're talking about 900 children. We're not talking about adults. So I'm just asking the council, please, to consider maybe some kind of revision or whatever to protect these students at that site. I know it wasn't brought up. A lot of things we don't see because we just used to a certain area. But when I looked at it and I saw it as the breadth of that area, I had to speak up on behalf of those children. So please reconsider what has been done.
I think a good point was made earlier that industry, anyone developing in that property near a school is going to be particularly sensitive to that. The last thing you want if you're developing a property is to expose yourself to potential lawsuits and everything else as a result of your activity on that property and its potential impact to especially school kids. I mean, there's no guarantee to that. But I think in our experience that anybody who develops that property, any heavy industrial development on there would put a pretty dramatic buffer between its facility and the school. Again, there's no guarantee, but historically, I think, Mike, in your experience, has that been the case?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it comes down a lot of times to the issue of a company's insurance underwriter is going to say, no, you're not going to do that with the schools in your back door. And they're very, very aware of that. And it's common practice.
Rick, is there any way for us to add a requirement to buffer schools and heavy industrial zoning?
I think that, potentially you could go back and create some language in the code, because there's no user there, it's vacant property. The question is, how big and how onerous does that buffer go? Is it from the property line or is it from the building? Because we have a graphic that Mike can put on the screen. From the property line to the property zoned heavy industry is, I don't know the number, it's on a map.
I don't know if y'all can see that or not. The distance from the property line to the physical building of the school is 1,802 feet, this says. Excuse me, from the heavy industry property to the building is 1,802 feet, and from the property line of the heavy industry to the property line of the school is 1,094 feet, according to this.
And that property between the school and the heavy industrial area is private property right now. It's
I would presume so, yes, sir. I don't know
Developable.
that for a fact, but I presume it is.
it's rural.
Mr.
It's rural or conservation, probably.
Like it's got some houses and things in it.
Okay. And the buffer would depend upon the type of industry, too, right?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm not really asking you, I mean, I think common sense dictates that the buffer would depend upon the type of industry.
Yeah, Chad gave us some EPA rules. Maybe there's a quadrant that says if it's this band of chemicals, it's X. If it's this, it's Y. I'm just thinking, to go to what Mike said earlier, we have a chance in West Ascension to do it right.
Yeah.
If we're going to do it right, we need to take those things into consideration. So we just need to add that, I think. Anything else we've forgotten?
Any further comments, public notice, public hearing? Staff? This time we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I move for acceptance.
It's been motion for acceptance. Can I get a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So noted. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, public hearing to consider 15-04, ordinance ZM 1504, revisions to the zoning map, West Bank.
So this is a continuation of the last item. The first item is to put the text into the code. The second item is to put the line on our zoning map that the text will refer to.
Public hearing.
Any comments, commissioners? This time, I'd like to open the floor for public hearing. Any comments, any cards?
Yes, Commissioner, I don't have anything to add unless you have questions.
I just have one comment. I just hope that we as a commission do everything we can to make sure that the interest of the city of Donaldsonville and the school board are taken into consideration. I know that Mike and his staff and his group will do that, do the best they can. And that's my only comment, Mr. Chairman.
No comments? Public hearing? This time we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve the revisions to the zoning map.
A motion?
I second the motion.
A motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So noted, the motion passes unanimously. Now, as my understanding, was this item pulled? This last item, contract agreement, public hearing, consider
Yes, sir.
Fellowship Church?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Item has been pulled. Staff report.
No, sir. No staff report.
Am I smiling? Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
A motion, second?
I'll second.
All in favor? I'm not asking the other question. Meeting adjourned. Good night, everyone.